Yuki Tsunoda finally got the dream seat next to Verstappen, and less than one season later, he's ordering the same breakfast as always, trying to act normal, knowing he's out of F1 in 2026. Meanwhile, Red Bull promotes Hadjar, keeps Lawson, launches Lindblad, and says maybe Yuki will come back. This is not just another Gasly or Albon case. It's the story of how the Red Bull Academy can take you to the top or trap you right when other doors were starting to open. Red Bull's decision knocks Tsunoda out of the most coveted and most toxic cockpit on the grid, but it's not only about performance. It shakes Honda, Aston Martin, the entire logic of the Red Bull Academy, and it may push the Japanese driver onto one of the trickiest paths Formula One offers: stay inside the system waiting for another chance, or step out before the door slams shut for good. What really happened to Yuki? Why did Red Bull choose Hadjar now and not give Tsunoda more time to adapt to the RB21 spaceship? And more importantly, what's the medium-term game where Tsunoda can still make it back onto the grid or vanish like so many other Academy names? Let's break it down. On the surface, the story looks simple. 2025, Perez leaves, Liam Lawson steps in alongside Verstappen. 2 races, 0 points, weak performances. Red Bull pulls the trigger fast. Lawson goes back to Racing Bulls. Tsunoda moves up to the main car. That move was already a clear sign. The top brass saw Yuki as someone with enough potential to at least survive the hardest seat in modern F1. He was coming off a genuine step forward at Racing Bulls. Fewer radio meltdowns, more consistency, strong race pace. Honda liked him. The junior team revolved around him. It finally felt like the right moment. But that seat is a poisoned chalice. Since Verstappen became the technical center of gravity at Red Bull, the car has been built around his style: an extremely strong front end, a rear end right on the limit, massive commitment on corner entry. For Max, that's paradise. For almost everybody else, it's like driving on a razor's edge. That's where the spaceship comes in. The 2025 RB21 is described internally as insanely fast and insanely demanding. In simple terms, to make it friendly for someone like Tsunoda, you have to dial back exactly that aggressive front end that makes the car so magical in qualifying. And without that front, you lose tire temperature, you lose response, you lose the car's main weapon. The result? Verstappen scores 396 points, wins 7 times, turns rough Sundays into brilliant damage limitation. Tsunoda finishes with 33 points, 3 more than he had the year before driving the Racing Bulls car. The obvious criticism is, come on, 33 points in a title-winning car? That's it, right? It's not that simple. First, because Tsunoda's biggest issue wasn't race pace. He himself said he felt clear progress on Sundays. The real hole was qualifying. A deficit of 3 to 4 tenths to your teammate in a front-running car is the difference between fighting for pole and getting stuck in traffic in Q2. And modern F1 is so tight that starting 11th or 12th kills half your Sunday. Second, because Red Bull never gave the project a full cycle to shape the car around 2 driving styles. The design still orbits Verstappen and the team's main goal: maximize points, titles, strategic control. The second car, in that context, needs someone who adapts quickly to what already exists, not someone who needs the concept to be redrawn. And that's where the next piece on the board comes in: Isack Hadjar. Hadjar arrives with the perfect narrative for this moment. He moves up from Racing Bulls after a solid rookie season. No big crashes, quick adaptation to the cars and new tracks. And when people ask about the cursed seat next to Max, he doesn't back down. He says he's not afraid, reminds everyone he's pretty much never repeated a car in his career, that he's always adapted, and he plays the 2026 card: new regulations, new car for everyone. From Milton Keynes' point of view, that matters a lot. With the rules changing, the team wants a second driver ready to handle an uncertain landscape, someone whose style isn't so locked in that it demands a very specific car. Hadjar sells exactly that: versatility and adaptation. But this story doesn't happen in a vacuum. It unfolds just as Honda is packing its bags and heading to Aston Martin, and that completely changes Tsunoda's political value. Up to now, the Japanese driver was Honda's guy inside Red Bull, a textbook product of the partnership, backed by the manufacturer, big marketing pool in Japan, a carefully paved road from the junior program to F1. But in 2026 and 2027, Honda power goes to Aston. Suddenly, at least on paper, Yuki becomes a very interesting asset for another team. If Red Bull had kept Tsunoda as a full-time race driver in 2026, they would have given Honda a sort of showcase guarantee until the switch. By demoting him to reserve, they send a different message. The priority is the academy itself. The line keeps moving. Lindblad needs to come up. Lawson needs mileage. Hadjar has to be tested next to Max. The Honda project is no longer central. You might ask, so why didn't Yuki get out earlier? Why didn't he talk to another team when he saw the risk? Because he couldn't. He admitted it himself. There was outside interest, but his Red Bull contract tied him down. No easy exit clauses, no real freedom to talk to whoever he wanted. It's the classic golden cage. You have a fast car, a huge brand on your overalls, and no real control over your own career. This has happened before at Red Bull. Jaime Alguersuari years ago turned down talks with other teams, believing he'd stay at Toro Rosso. He was dropped and pretty much disappeared from F1. Same pattern. The driver puts all his chips on the system, trusts that loyalty will be rewarded, and finds out too late that the logic there is different. Performance, academy pipeline, political timing. With Tsunoda, the trauma is similar, but there's one key difference. The team is leaving the door slightly open. Laurent Mekies, now the Red Bull team principal, calls the choice very difficult, describes the second seat as not an easy place, the car as demanding to drive, and repeats over and over, "We hope he gets another chance. We were famous for quick decisions in the past. Look at Yuki himself. He ended 2024 thinking he wouldn't be promoted. 3 races later, he was in the champion-winning car." Why does that message matter? Because it's not just consolation, it's positioning in the driver market. By turning Tsunoda into a test and reserve driver for both Red Bull and Racing Bulls, the team creates 2 things at once. First, a sporting insurance policy. If Hadjar gets swallowed by the comparison with Max, if Lawson struggles, if someone gets injured, they have an experienced, integrated driver ready to plug in. Second, a signal to other teams. Yuki is still inside, using the simulator, accessing data, doing tests. If anyone wants to bet on him, they're not signing a rusted driver. This is where the obvious parallel comes in. Alex Albon. Albon lived the same sequence, promoted early to Red Bull, crumbles under the weight of comparison with Verstappen, is dropped to reserve. But instead of disappearing, he uses that year to become valuable in a different way. Heavy simulator work, strong paddock presence, very professional attitude. When a seat opens at Williams, he's not the ex-Red Bull guy who was discarded. He's the driver who is still sharp, who understands modern cars, who has a good internal reputation. If Tsunoda wants to follow that playbook, 2026 becomes a pivotal year. It's not just about waiting for someone else to fail, it's about reinventing himself. He has to be useful technically, be the guy who sorts setups in the simulator, who helps decode the new 2026 regulations. He has to build his image, show maturity, be less of a radio meme, more of the solid professional any midfield team would love to have. And behind the scenes, he needs to align his future with Honda. Because looking ahead to 2027, the most logical landing spot for Yuki isn't back at Red Bull, it's Aston Martin. Imagine the equation. Honda brings a new engine to Aston, wants a Japanese face fronting the project, someone who understands how the manufacturer works, who literally speaks the internal language. If Aston's lineup is in transition by then, balancing experience and youth, Yuki becomes an obvious piece in a technical and commercial package, either as a direct race seat or as a part of a phased handover as a big name moves out. But that scenario only becomes real if he gets through 2026 the right way. If he disappears in a corner of the garage and becomes just another burned ex-Red Bull driver, Honda might well prefer to back a new Japanese talent from its own pipeline, or go for a completely different profile that makes more sense in terms of marketing and performance. And that leads to the uncomfortable question. Is the best move for Tsunoda really to stay 100% locked into F1 in 2026? Specialized media is already floating a different strategy. Do what Albon did, but on another level. Accept racing elsewhere, still tied to Honda. IndyCar, Super Formula, WEC, IMSA with Acura. There's a world where he becomes Honda's sporting ambassador across multiple series, keeps his race sharpness, scores wins, builds his name, and then comes back to F1 as a more complete driver, not as someone who spent a whole year just pushing buttons in the simulator. The problem is, Tsunoda doesn't really sound like that kind of pragmatist. He comes across as a bit more romantic. If he has to leave F1, he wants to do it on his own terms. He's still dreaming of a comeback.
He says he's just surviving emotionally, as he put it, going for the same breakfast the morning after the news, as if sticking to the routine is the only way to feel any control.
That says a lot about where he is right now. When he says, "I'm fine," I mean, I'm not fine, but I'm surviving okay. It's a driver trying to hold together an entire life plan that just collapsed. He grew up inside the Red Bull-Honda bubble, turned down chances to leave the family even when there was outside interest, bet everything on that path. And now he has to walk around the paddock knowing that at least for a year, his name won't be on the Sunday grid. So what does this story really show about Red Bull and about F1 today? First, the academy system is ruthless. It churns out talent in bulk, but there are only 2 seats at the very top. When a new generation, Hadjar, Lindblad, starts banging on the door, someone has to go. Contracts that once looked like protection suddenly feel like chains. Second, the second Red Bull seat has become a brutal career filter. If you click, like Perez did in 2021 and 2022, you become a constructors champion, get huge exposure, cash in. If you don't click immediately, there is very little time to learn. The car is built for Verstappen, the pressure is maxed out, the comparison is constant, and the media is relentless. Gasly, Albon, now Tsunoda, the pattern is in plain sight. Third, engine politics and manufacturer strategies are shaping individual careers more than ever. If Honda weren't heading to Aston Martin, Red Bull might play a completely different game with Yuki. Because they are leaving, the Japanese driver turns into an asset that can move with them, a future bargaining chip, or be forgotten if he doesn't manage 2026 carefully. In the end, the key point is this. Yuki wasn't just demoted. He was pushed into one of those rare crossroads in F1 where every choice, staying quietly inside Red Bull, chasing mileage in another category, tightening his ties with Honda for 2027, can decide whether he ends up as yet another talent chewed up by the machine, or as the guy who, like Albon, climbed out of the hole and rewrote his own story. The 2026 chapter isn't written yet, but one thing is clear after this decision. Red Bull has already picked its next generation. Now it's Yuki's turn to decide whether he'll be just an extra in this new cycle or the protagonist in an unlikely comeback. If you want to keep track of how this whole chessboard shifts from the cursed seat next to Verstappen to what Honda really does with Aston in 2027, it's worth subscribing here to F1 Revealed. Every time the driver market moves, we'll be back to connect these dots that today might look like just another headline, but later explain why some careers survive and others end over breakfast on an ordinary day.